don't.
Yeah, so all you've done is adopt a new authority structure. And when it comes down to it, there's not actually any real basis for you to believe these things. Other than that, a lot of people believe it and a lot of powerful people believe it. But you yourself have not verified any of these things.
But, well, yes. I mean, there's only so much that one human can do. I mean.
So it operates kind of like on a faith-based thing. It sounds like a faith-based thing for you.
Where I'm coming from is, I guess, how do I sum it up? Someone who was, I guess, Christian, brought up somewhat, grew up Lutheran, became, Presbyterian, tried to, as a believer as you could be. But in light of, so much. Okay, well, let me put it this way: if you could summarize religion, if you could, put it into some, it is a part of what we are as humans, as primates, and what it's come from. It was our first explanation of the world. It's our explanation of, everything. Our first attempt at science. And so you would have to believe that for hundreds of thousands of years that, the world just exists. And then a few thousand years ago, God comes along in this place and says, okay, we've got to do something about this. And here we go. Here's, we're going to get involved. And then, but I can't reconcile the science, the archaeology, the observations we have around us, the science we have with.
Would this be like the same science that says that biology is not determined by chromosomes? That science? What science?
Biology is not determined by chromosomes.
Yeah, your gender.
No, not at all.
So that's not good science. Is that because that's the science today, right?
I don't think so. I think there are two sexes, as far as I know.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, so what's the true science here?
Okay, so I would land on the side of observable science. I mean, science that you can be, actually, tested in reality.
Mm-hmm.
Not social science. Not any type of.
Does a doctor count?
As a conservative.
The doctors count because they're the ones saying that they do a lot of observable. They're the ones that are actually like changing the peepees, right?
Well, okay. No, I am against all that. Let me take it. Okay, let me ask you this. As I respect you as a fellow primate, as a fellow human, but we come from other humans. We are Homo sapiens now, but we have come from a long line of other.
Okay, what is that? What's that to do with anything to do with God's existence? So.
Okay, I can understand that, but you would have to believe that for 300,000 years there was no Christianity as we are talking about today. There was no.
Where are you getting the 300,000 years? Is that an observable thing? Or did you observe that?
Well, would you give me 100,000?
You can make it as many aeons as you want. Are any of those aeons observable?
Are those people any less valuable than the humans that exist today?
I asked you a question, so then you two quote me. Are any of those humans is that observable at all? The humans in the ape men, the Piltdown man, in the 100,000 year time frame that you're talking about. Have you observed that?
Okay, well, they would be observable in archaeological evidence. Yes, we have proof that there were
like Piltdown man, like who? Like Piltdown man, Nebraska man. Are those good examples?
There are, there would be some. There would
be, well, those are frauds, though. Well, those are frauds.
Go ahead.
Those are frauds.
Okay.
They're famous frauds.
I wouldn't deny that there are. But you would also
Well, the
say
ones
that
that you agree.
there is archaeological evidence that does go back hundreds of thousands of years, correct?
Says who? Science?
Well,
Okay. Yeah, so it's funny. But now, wait a minute. You said it was observable science. So I'm just wondering, like, you didn't observe it. So, but a scientific establishment claims to have observed it. But they didn't observe it either, right?
well, yes. I mean, we're assuming that it is something that is,
That's a pretty big assumption.
Has been excavated from the ground, has been studied, has been, I mean, it has been built upon for many years. And it's something that's not, it's not in the sense that science, I mean, it's not something that's perfect, but it is something that does, have a usefulness.
Well,
right?
it sounds to me
it
like
is something that we can measure, right? I mean, we can measure ice cores. We can measure tree ring.
okay.
We can.
How
how
are there fossils that extend below and between various ice cores that should not be there?
In what instance?
No, there's many of them. There's many of them. There's many of them. You can look them up, right? What about the fly geyser? The fly geyser is supposedly, that's something that takes, I think, 200,000, 300,000 years to form, and it formed in 40 years. So how's that possible?
No, I wouldn't doubt that there are events, and I'm not a scientist at all.
Oh, no, wait a minute. So you're not a scientist. So this is not your observation.
No, it's not.
Right. You've accepted a new authority that's not based on any of your own.
For the vast majority of humans, it's never going to be, something that they're assigned.
But that same scientific establishment now says that a man can be a woman, and you said no, I don't believe that. So you don't follow the science.
Well, I don't think that the serious scientists.
Oh, really? Like the Tavistock Institute? The Tavistock Institute. So Tavistock is not a serious science entity. You don't think the biggest, most powerful clinics in the United States, which are pushing out Vanderbilt University, is not an authoritative scientific institution? I thought it was like the preeminent medical institution.
I wouldn't give it that. I don't know.
Vanderbilt University. Okay.
Like that.
All right. So Vanderbilt, the premier medical institution in the United States, according to you, now isn't that, because you haven't given it that title.
The United States is 200 years old. I mean, these things go back far beyond, even our own country.
I gave you an example of a medical institution that is esteemed as one of the top medical institutions in the country, which is a spearhead of the idea that you can become a woman if you're a man. And you're saying, I don't accept that authority.
I think that's twisted by social sciences. I think that's...
So they're not really doing this. It's social science, but they're not really doing it. They're not really changing.
I think they're trying to do things. I think they're trying to change things. I don't.
Yeah. So all you've done is adopt a new authority structure, and when it comes down to it, there's not actually any real basis for you to believe these things. Other than that, a lot of people believe it, and a lot of powerful people believe it. But you yourself have not verified any of these things.
But well, yes. I mean, there's only so much that one human can do. I mean.
So it operates kind of like on a faith-based thing. It sounds like a faith-based thing for you.
I see what you're saying in that sense, but okay, that's true. You're also making a faith-based claim.
Correct, because I believe everything at root.
Claims.
Correct. I do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
And
So whose worldview?
More likely.
So whose worldview is more consistent? Because likelihood is going to depend upon more fundamental presuppositions. So I think I have a consistent worldview, which can give an account for how we know things, how we have ethics, how we live in the world. But I don't believe that the atheist naturalist worldview that I hear you presenting can give an account for any of those things.
I don't necessarily think that any of the scientific world accounts that you're refuting a lot of things that there is probably a lot of evidence for, and that it probably cannot be.
Oh, right, but you don't know that. Just probably, maybe, probably. Well, let me ask you this way: can science provide us with ethics?
No, that's not its job. That's not what it should do.
Okay, but it can provide truth.
Well, I think it can provide insight into reality. Yes, into what exists.
Okay. But it can't do anything with values. Do you think truth pertains to values? The true and the false don't relate to values. Should you follow the true as opposed to the false?
Yeah, I think you should not deceive yourself. Yes, I think you should not be.
Oh, so it does pertain to values.
Well, I don't think that believing in fairy tales is.
Well, you're calling it a fairy tale. Well, I'm saying on your position, it sounds like all values would be a fairy tale. But you just told me that you should follow what's true. Why ought I follow what's true in your worldview?
Follow what's true. Well, what do we know that's true? How do we know?
Well, you said science can give us. You said science gives us an insight into reality. You said that it pertains to what is true, and I said, does the true relate to value judgments, like the true versus the false? Ought I follow the true versus the false? Well, that's value judgments. But you said science doesn't give value judgments. So I'm trying to figure out, why ought I follow what's true in your view? What's the basis for your ethics?
Well, I think ethics are an extension of what we are as humans over many, many years.
Okay, but that wasn't an explanation. That's not an explanation for why I ought to.
And if you look, if you look at evolution and
that's not an explanation for why I ought to do something, right? That's a story about the past.
But it gives us an insight into what we are today.
Well, there's no. But why is that telling me what I ought to do? Ought. Can you get an ought from an is?
You would have to nail that down for me. What do you exactly mean by that?
By stating how things are, doesn't tell me how they ought to be. So you can tell me all day long that we're primates and we're apes and we came from, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but how ought we live? What's the basis for the ethics of the value judgments there? Because a minute ago you were saying we should follow what's true. Why should I do anything in your worldview? What's the basis for the shoulds, the ought, the value judgments, the ethics?
Would that not come? I don't. One thing is, I have to tell you, I don't discount religion as part of the overall human process of trying to find the truth of reality. So I would never say that we don't need religion historically. It was part of what got us to the point where we are now. But going forward, do we still need to believe in Zeus and Thor and,
So none of that was an answer to a very simple question. I would think that with all of your sophistication and the knowledge of science that you're propounding, that we would have some way to account for what we ought to do. But I'm not hearing why I ought to follow what you're saying or any other value judgment.
I don't ask you to follow me, though.
But wait a minute. You said that I should. No. You said I should follow what's true, namely the science. Why should I follow anything? That's an ought. That's a value judgment. Ethics.
Right. Well, I would not follow another primate, another human who makes.
Okay, then I don't. Then I shouldn't listen to
claims.
So I shouldn't listen to your arguments.
Are beyond what are believable, what are provable, or even.
Okay, but I'm asking you
basic assumptions.
I'm asking you a question
based on what?
I'm asking you a question that's prior to that claim, which is about value judgments themselves. How are they possible in your worldview? It's a very simple question.
Howard,
okay.
Can you rephrase?
So ethics, value judgments, it's a specific domain of philosophy, right? When you said that you should follow what's true, namely the science, that is an ethical value judgment claim. But you're going to have to make good on that given your naturalistic worldview. In the history of philosophy, this is called, can I get an ought from an is? And the answer, of course, is that you can't. There's no ought. Science can't give you value judgments. But you told me I should follow what's true versus what's false. So that's an inconsistency in your position. And I'm saying that your position as an atheist naturalist can't even tell me if there are value judgments. It makes them all the time. And yet you're turning around and saying, well, I don't need basis.
Value judgments come from, our experience as humans.
Okay, that's not,
from generation
that doesn't
to
tell me
generation
what's
over
right or
time.
wrong. Their origin doesn't tell me what's right or wrong. What basis should I follow it?
Why not?
Because it could be false.
How would
Because it's a
Israelites
fallacy.
have gotten,
Do you know what
Sinai?
fallacies are? It's called the genetic fallacy. So the origin of something doesn't entail whether it's true or false. That's a genetic
How would we
fallacy.
not if we can't cooperate with each other, if we don't understand that murder is not
you're not-
wrong, that stealing is not
For
wrong,
all of the sophisticated,
if we don't understand these things, how can you progress at all as a society? How have we built this civilization
again,
we
value
have now?
progressing is a value judgment. So you can't tell me what it means to progress.
Well, here we are. We've done it.
All right. Good try, but we're going to have to move on.